artists, unfortunately, are oftentimes concerned with being musically correct and having on the right clothes and the right makeup. And
I'm over 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
I'm not a thin woman. I'm not afraid to laugh and to have a lot of fun. I'm not very quiet.
Phyllis Hyman was everything the industry claimed to want. Talented, striking, outspoken, and original.
I've also been burned in the past, letting other people do that. Those who claim to have been the experts, and I got burned. And I'm skeptical that once you put your name on that piece of paper, you are bound and gagged, and I don't like that.
But behind the image was a woman who never quite fit, not into their boxes, not into their expectations, and some days, not even into her own life. She had the voice, the looks, the stage presence. She could bring a room to tears with one note.
Hoping love will fade away like some old car.
But the truth is, none of that was ever enough. Not for the people around her, not for the industry that kept trying to change her, and eventually, not for herself.
Hit the music world today. R&B singer Phyllis Hyman was found dead in her apartment this afternoon.
The 45-year-old Hyman was supposed to sing at the Apollo Theater today.
By the time she hit her 40s, she was still performing, still pushing, still trying. But the cracks were getting harder to hide.
Known what it was going to be like, I never would have gone into it. It's much harder. The sacrifices are much more extensive. I thought that along with the success and the money would come a husband and kids. I don't have either of those.
Would you give up the money and success for the husband and kids?
Forget it.
On the day she was set to perform at the Apollo, Phyllis asked someone to bring her favorite soul food, told her team she was just taking a nap, and locked the door. What they found hours later wasn't just heartbreaking, it was the final page of a story no one had finished reading. This is the life and final days of Phyllis Hyman. Phyllis Hyman was born July 6, 1949 in Philadelphia, the first of 7 children. Her family moved to Pittsburgh when she was young and settled in St. Clair Village, a public housing project on the city's south side. Home wasn't peaceful. Her father worked long hours on the railroad, and when he was home, he drank. Her mother, Louise, was overwhelmed and dealing with depression. That left Phyllis, the oldest, to fill the gaps. She was the one who took charge when no one else could. Her siblings remember her as commanding, protective, sharp-tongued, sometimes intimidating. She had presence, even as a teenager. At Carrick High School, that presence became impossible to ignore. She was 6 feet tall by her teens, light-skinned, magnetic, and already singing with a voice that made people stop and listen. Her choir teacher, David Tamber, noticed it immediately. He took her under his wing, gave her private lessons, and even helped shape her stage image, getting her teeth capped, choosing her outfits, and encouraging her to get comfortable in nightclubs. She briefly attended Robert Morris College after high school and became the first student there to receive a music scholarship. But the classroom couldn't hold her for long. After a year, she dropped out. She worked as a secretary, as a babysitter. She drank more, took pills, and kept trying to figure out where she fit, not just in the industry, but in her own life. Eventually, she joined a touring group called New Direction and started performing on the road. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave her a taste of what she really wanted, a life in music. By 1973, she got an offer to join a new band in Miami. She said yes, no guarantee of fame, just a shot to start over, somewhere louder, somewhere warmer. She packed up, left Pittsburgh behind, and hit the road with nothing but her voice and her ambition. And for Phyllis Hyman, that was enough. So she packed it up, the voice, the glam, the armor, still chasing a dream that was finally starting to feel within reach, but never without a cost. Miami in the early 70s was a proving ground for singers. Clubs stayed open late, cruise ships needed live bands, and musicians from all over came looking for their break. Phyllis Hyman didn't waste time. She started singing anywhere that would book her, jazz clubs, lounges, ships. She joined several bands, including one called All the People, and began building a name for herself in the city's live music scene. In 1974, she put together her own band, Phyllis Hyman and the PH Factor. They played everything from jazz to Latin to funk, and they played often. She wasn't just the lead singer, she was running the whole thing, booking gigs, managing rehearsals, handling money. Her boyfriend at the time, Larry Alexander, sometimes drove her to shows. Eventually, he became her manager. People in Miami took notice. She was tall, beautiful, and her voice had power, not just range, presence. When she sang, It wasn't just performance, it was expression. But not every opportunity felt right. She got offers from labels, but turned them down. They wanted her to go pop, tone it down, fit in. She wasn't willing, not yet. Still, the industry kept circling. Her cameo in the 1974 Bob Fosse film, Lenny, small, wordless, added a little shine to her resume. It wasn't a big break, but it was something. She recorded a few tracks with Desert Moon Records, but the creative control wasn't there. Producers pushed her toward disco and commercial sounds she didn't connect with. Her band didn't like the direction either. By the end of 1975, she was ready to move again. She took the PH Factor to New York, where the gigs were tougher, the rooms were louder, and the competition was endless. It wasn't just about the next show anymore. It was about legacy, and Phyllis believed she had one worth fighting for. By late 1975, Phyllis Hyman had outgrown Miami. She packed up and moved to New York with her band, the PH Factor, locking in a steady gig at Russ Brown's nightclub. That's where Norman Connors saw her perform. Connors, a respected jazz drummer and producer, was looking for a female vocalist for his next album. Phyllis didn't know the track he had in mind, Betcha by Golly Wow, but when they got in the studio together, she recorded 3 songs for his 1976 album, You Are My Starship, including the duet, We Both Need Each Other, with Michael Henderson. The album went gold. The single cracked the top 30. For the first time, Phyllis Hyman had a national audience. Desert Moon, her label at the time, tried to ride the wave. They released her solo single, Baby I'm Gonna Love You, but it stalled on the charts. Meanwhile, Connors convinced her to leave Desert Moon and sign with Arista Records, the label he was on. It promised more visibility and more creative control. Phyllis's self-titled debut album dropped in 1977. She and Larry handled the production themselves, but they weren't big names yet, and without a seasoned hitmaker behind the boards, the album was hard to market. Critics praised her voice but said the production made her sound like everybody else. Still, it was progress. She toured, she worked, and she kept control. But the success didn't last long. Arista Records was declining, and by the time her second album, Sing a Song, was released in 1978, the label was barely functioning. The album didn't chart. Arista folded soon after. She needed a lifeline. And that's when Clive Davis called. He'd just acquired Arista and was building a new roster for his label, Arista Records. Phyllis Hyman got a $50,000 advance and a second shot at the career she'd been chasing for nearly a decade. But what Clive offered in resources, he also demanded in control. And for Phyllis Hyman, that was always the hard part. When Phyllis Hyman joined Arista Records in 1978, it felt like the real beginning. This wasn't another indie label. This was Clive Davis, the man behind Janis Joplin, Earth, Wind & Fire, and Aretha Franklin. A powerhouse, a kingmaker. Her first project under Arista, Somewhere in My Lifetime, was a blend, half new, half leftovers from her unreleased Arista sessions. Barry Manilow came in to produce the title track, giving it polish and commercial shine. It peaked at number 15 on the R&B charts. Not a smash, but a major step forward. Clive pushed her to follow it quickly. In 1979, she dropped You Know How to Love Me. The album became a fan favorite, and the title track is still considered one of her signature songs. It reached number 12 on the R&B charts and climbed into the top 10 on Billboard's dance charts. But with every success came a compromise. Phyllis was never a passive artist. She wanted input over her songs, her producers, her sound, her look. But Arista was a machine, and machines didn't stop for creative freedom. Clive had a formula, and he wanted her to follow it. She pushed back. He pushed harder. She wanted to work with Quincy Jones. Clive said no. She wanted to title her next album Sunshine in My Life. Clive renamed it Can't We Fall in Love Again. It dropped in 1981 and gave her a top 10 R&B single, but the control was slipping further out of her hands. Around that same time, Phyllis also found another outlet, Broadway. She joined the cast of Sophisticated Ladies, a Duke Ellington revue that became a surprise hit. She dazzled, night after night. Balancing 8 shows a week with recording sessions wasn't easy, but it gave her something Arista never could, a space to truly command the stage on her terms. Still, the pressure was getting to her. Her relationship with Larry Alexander, who had once been her musical partner and manager, was deteriorating. They were still legally married, but emotionally the distance had already set in, and so had the coping. Phyllis started drinking more, using pills. Rumors of cocaine use followed. But still, she showed up, glamorous, poised, composed, at least on the outside. She was doing interviews, performing on TV, touring constantly. But the tension was growing harder to hide. Clive began to distance himself. Other artists were becoming the priority. Dionne Warwick had just signed to Arista, and she came pre-packaged with pop crossover appeal. Then came a young powerhouse from New Jersey, Whitney Houston, and Clive threw the full weight of the machine behind her. Phyllis watched it happen. She had the voice, the presence, the talent. But she didn't have what they had: compliance. Phyllis was talented, but she was also difficult, too opinionated, too proud, too unwilling to just go along. In 1983, she released Goddess of Love. The music was solid, her voice as powerful as ever. But the label had already moved on. The promotion was minimal. The sales were weak. And Clive Davis made the quiet decision: she would not be Arista's next star. And just like that, she was out, dropped from the label, still in debt from advance money, still unsigned, still fighting to hold on to the career she had built with grit, pain, and ambition. But just as the door was closing in music, another opened on a different kind of stage. Broadway was still calling. Broadway gave Phyllis something the record industry never could: unconditional applause. In 1981, Sophisticated Ladies opened at the Lunt-Fontanne Theater in New York. It was a Duke Ellington musical revue, all glam, big band energy, and style. And Phyllis, she didn't just belong on that stage, she owned it. She wore the gowns, she hit the notes, she got standing ovations, and for the first time in a long time, she was being celebrated for exactly who she was. Critics praised her magnetic stage presence. She earned a Tony nomination for Best Featured Actress in a Musical and took home a Theatre World Award. 8 shows a week, no vocal track, no redos, just Phyllis, raw and real. But even at her peak, the shadows followed. She struggled with punctuality. Sometimes she missed performances altogether. Other times she showed up late and flustered, still recovering from the night before. Castmates whispered, producers warned, fans forgave, until they couldn't. Behind the curtain, Phyllis was still unraveling. Her marriage had collapsed. The label had dropped her. The pressure to perform, perfectly, consistently, was still crushing. And her coping mechanisms? They were getting harder to hide. She told interviewers she was tired, that men didn't talk to her, that being in the industry was lonely. But what she rarely said out loud, at least not on camera, was that she was hurting, deeply.
She's there. I talked to a famous ball player who plays for the Chicago Bulls, and if he's listening, you know I'm talking about you. And he told me point blank that he would never date a woman like me because he couldn't control me.
In the middle of all this, she got what could have been the opportunity of a lifetime. Steven Spielberg was casting for The Color Purple. The role of Shug Avery was wide open, a sultry, soulful singer with a complicated heart. It wasn't just a perfect fit, it felt like destiny. Phyllis auditioned. Her voice stunned them. But when it came time to meet with Spielberg directly, something cracked. She tried to direct the session, told him how she wanted it done, took over the room. It didn't land. Instead of sealing the role, she walked out of that audition with a different kind of regret. Not because she wasn't good enough, but because she couldn't get out of her own way. The part went to Margaret Avery, and Phyllis, once the frontrunner, was left with another what if. Broadway loved her, audiences adored her, but no stage could silence the noise in her head, the anxiety, the loneliness, the fear that none of it, not the tours, not the albums, not the standing ovations, would ever be enough. By the time Sophisticated Ladies closed in 1983, Phyllis Hyman was still standing, but she was exhausted, and the next act of her life would be defined by what the industry left behind. By the early 90s, Phyllis Hyman was still performing, still touring, still showing up in glitter and heels, but everything beneath the surface was starting to collapse. She was lonely. Her last long-term relationship had ended. Her friends say she tried dating again, even briefly fell in love with a woman named Martha, but it didn't last. Phyllis didn't do halfway, and most people couldn't keep up with her highs or survive her lows. The pills were constant, the alcohol, routine. Some nights she was brilliant on stage, electrifying. Other nights she'd slur her words, forget lyrics, drift into silence mid-performance. Her band, her audience, even her family. They saw the pattern. But by then, It was bigger than anyone could fix. She told people she was tired. She told her team she wasn't made for this world. And yet, she still pushed. In 1991, she released what would be her final album, Prime of My Life, ironically titled maybe, but emotionally honest. The single, Don't Want to Change the World, hit #1 on the R&B charts, her biggest success yet. On paper, it was a win, but the victory felt hollow. Phyllis wasn't interested in reinvention. She wasn't chasing trends. She wasn't trying to play the industry's game anymore. What she gave on that album was pure feeling, vulnerability in the form of melody. But even as the music got more honest, the life behind it got harder to hold up. She checked herself into rehab. Twice. She tried to get better, but grief kept knocking.
As I said earlier, I have begun the process of recovery, so to speak, you know, just trying to feel better about myself, regain my confidence.
But you seem like the type of person that lives life from one extreme. There's no medium ground.
Oh, no.
In 1993, her grandmother passed. Then her mother, just weeks later. Phyllis was never the same after that. The pain that had always followed her finally caught up. She withdrew, stopped writing, stopped taking calls. She was still singing, still booking gigs, still showing up. But the spark was dimmer. There were fewer smiles, more silences. Friends say she started talking about death, casually, like it was an option on the table, something she was weighing. She wasn't being dramatic. She was being honest. By 1995, Phyllis had one more show scheduled, the Apollo Theater, a night that should have been a celebration, a homecoming, a reminder of everything she still had to give. Instead, it became the day the music stopped. June 30th, 1995. It was supposed to be just another show. The band was set. Her outfit was ready. She'd even asked someone to bring her favorite soul food that afternoon, a small comfort before another night under the lights. She told her team she was going to lie down, just a nap. Then she locked the door. When they came to check on her later, there was no answer, no sound, no movement, just a note. Phyllis Hyman had died by suicide, 6 days before her 46th birthday. She left behind one final message. I'm tired. I'm tired. Those of you that I love know who you are. May God bless you. It wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. Just honest. Because for Phyllis, the pain wasn't new. It wasn't sudden. It had been building for years. In every fight to be understood, in every performance that drained more than it gave, in every promise the industry made and broke, she carried all of it. The childhood she tried to escape, the career that never fully embraced her, the love she kept searching for, but never quite found, the loneliness, the pills, the silence between the songs. And still, she gave the world her voice, rich, tender, raw, a voice that could break you open, because it was already singing from something broken. She didn't get the ending she deserved, but her story doesn't end in that room. It lives on, in every note that still stirs a soul, in every woman who sees herself in her defiance, in every truth she dared to sing when it wasn't safe to say out loud. Phyllis Hyman may have died in silence, but she left behind a sound that still refuses to be ignored.